The Justice Beat is dedicated to the 1 in 3 Americans touched by incarceration. The Justice Beat is where we discuss all things justice.
Good morning and welcome to the Justice Beat Talk Show. Please join me in welcoming and giving a great hearty good morning to our executive producer and host, Miss Elaine.
Hey, Nick, good morning. Thank you so much for that wonderful intro. Good morning, Justice Beat Talk Show fans. We're so glad that you're back for another installment of the Justice Beat Talk Show. Our guest today is Mr. Tyrone Walker, who is the director of the Georgetown University Prison Scholars and Pivot Program. The Pivot Program is a non-credit bearing certificate in business and entrepreneurship, created specifically for formerly incarcerated individuals, designed and delivered by Georgetown faculty. The Pivot Program is a one-year transition and reentry program centered on a blend of academic work and supported employment. The Prison Scholars Program brings higher education opportunities to students incarcerated in DC and Maryland, turning carceral spaces into college classrooms. The program empowers its students through a transformative education experience. These scholars expand their thinking, engage with their peers, challenge themselves academically, and build self-confidence. Would you please help me welcome Mr. Tyrone Walker? Good morning, Tyrone.
Good morning, Elaine, and thank you for having me.
Yes, glad that you could join us. And we also have another faculty member who's not going to be on camera, but is listening in, Miss Rachel Simmons. Thank you for joining us, Miss Simmons. All right, so Mr. Walker, let's talk. How long has the program been around?
Which one? I mean, we got so many.
You have the two programs, the Pivot Program and the Prison Scholars Program. So let's talk about Pivot.
Okay, let me put it in the context of scholars.
Okay.
Because the Scholars Program is a program that's only ran in DC jail. And it's ran in one of the jails, not because DC is like a weird place that houses its people.
Okay.
And so DC has two jails since the district no longer has a prison.
Mm-hmm.
So they got the detention center, and then they had the treatment center.
Mm-hmm.
The Scholars Program is held inside of the treatment facility.
Okay.
And it's a credit-bearing course. And they get classes in government, they get classes in philosophy,
mm-hmm.
They get English classes, they get writing classes. So they get a host of classes from Georgetown faculty, who I like to say coming down from the hilltop and meeting people where they are.
Right.
And like helping them in life. And normally, some of us have a good fortune of transitioning from one of the DC jails into the Georgetown Pivot Program.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
So the Georgetown Pivot Program is an entrepreneurship / internship program.
Okay.
And is taught once again by Georgetown faculty to people who are formerly incarcerated. And it takes about 10 months to a year, like the transition through. Once again, you're learning philosophy, you're learning a lot of courses in business, because the Georgetown Pivot Program is partnered with Georgetown's Madonna School of Business.
Okay.
So you're getting the business portion that's taught by the faculty, and then something else special happens, that those people, once they finish their coursework, they're placed in the internship.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so these internship placements in places like Deloitte, the Justice Policy Institute, and various hosts, Dick Sporting Goods. It's so many of Starbucks, because some of them even go inside management in Starbucks. And we have so many different hosts who want to support people who are returning to the community from incarceration.
Mm-hmm. Okay, okay. Now I understand you are or have participated in the Pivot program. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, can you talk about your experience as a participant?
Well, I graduated from the first cohort of the Georgetown University Pivot program.
Okay.
And I transitioned from the Scholars program into the Georgetown Pivot program.
Okay.
And that's why I said I put it in that context, because it happens the next year, the Pivot program started. The Scholars program was up and running. And I was in the Scholars program inside of the Central Treatment Facility
Okay.
at DC Jail. And I got recognized by one of the professors as someone who was well-read and loved to study.
Mhm.
And he asked me, like, what do you think of, I heard you getting out, would you want to join the Georgetown Pivot program? And he explained to me what it was. And I always tell a story. He was telling me it was you learn courses, and he said, I'll be teaching philosophy, and
Mhm.
you'll be learning other things in philosophy and business, and you'll be placed in an internship. And then he said this one part. He said, and we're going to pay you.
Okay.
I
that was an incentive, right?
I said, stop. You don't need to tell me anything else. He's like, let me finish. I said, you done told me all I need to know.
Right.
That you're going to pay me to get an education from Georgetown.
Hmm. Nice.
I said, no, not, I haven't heard of many opportunities like this one. And so once I was released, I started school in the Pivot program 6 days later after I was released.
Wow.
Yes.
And how long does the internship program run?
The internship starts after you go through all of your academic work.
Right.
Then you placed in the internship. And so I stayed in my internship. I actually worked I interned for the Justice Policy Institute.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So I interned from the Justice Policy Institute, and I took a lot of things that I had learned in business, and I applied it to policy work and, social issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one course we was taught by Professor Lovegrove.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about how you look at businesses and pull them apart and find weaknesses and build them. So I was fortunate enough to be in that class and listen to all these lectures. And I started writing about issues that I was going through.
Okay.
And I developed a concept paper as an intern.
Hmm.
And DC government funded that idea. They liked the idea. And so the Justice Policy Institute is currently getting a grant from a concept paper I developed.
Wow. What was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So so since I've moved on from there,
Mm-hmm.
that position is still currently being held by a person who's formerly incarcerated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so what were some of the gaps that you saw? When you broke it apart, what were some things you identified? Because that's an awesome skill set to have, to be able to, companies can think that they're running really, really a tight ship, and to have somebody come in externally and identify some things. What were some things that you identified?
It was reentry issues. Like, one of the first things I was talking about is that I went to go get my voucher so I can get an ID. So I had got my birth certificate. And so I was like, oh, I need to get a Social Security card. Nobody told me that the Social Security Administration was approximately 200 feet away.
Okay.
So I was like, this is crazy. I was like, that's how many gaps are in reentry.
Okay.
Where people just don't learn to convey information properly to people.
Mm-hmm.
Especially people who have served a long prison term.
Okay.
So I knew all about reentry. While I was incarcerated, I served on what they called the Inmate Reentry Council.
Mhm,
I was actually finding resources for other people in different states and telling them things that they need to do.
mhm.
But when you serve a long prison term, like you don't know how to get to these places.
Right, exactly.
So I was talking about that. I was like, my family was there to support me. I love that. But their knowledge only go but so far. I
So,
knew more about reentry than my family did. I
mhm,
just didn't know how to get to the places to do the things I needed to do. I
right,
couldn't know where they were at. And so I was identifying gaps like that, like helping people, having more peer navigators around and
right.
being more hands-on when a person is actually released.
Mhm,
Sometimes when people are released, family grabbing at you, trying to get your attention, they're not thinking about the things that they have in their wallet, like an ID, a smart trip card, a credit
exactly.
card. They're not thinking about these things because they've had it, all their lives. So they don't really think about those things in your needs. And so I start talking about the gaps in that and like having somebody who do understand that and putting them with people as they are released to help them navigate the system to be successful.
And I'm familiar with at least the last 10 years where there was a big push to try to involve family members in the reentry coordination services when a person is about to be released. Did that occur for you? Was there somebody that was targeted or somebody you identified as a family member that could go through that process so they become familiar with what the needs would be?
No, I mean that was a part of it too. But you understand that most people, families, the people who are in their lives, those are the breadwinners.
Right.
So they can't just take off from work and try to do all these things and pay the bills too around the house.
That is true. And some of those things don't have to necessarily be done on site though, or in person. I mean, but just to involve them from where they are in terms of informing them. These are the kind of supports that are going to be needed, informing them about where things are located, like you mentioned, the Social Security office, at least bringing them into the process, not trying to pull them off a job to come to a class or something like that. But there should be some coordinated effort when the person typically is about 6 months, let's say a year to 6 months out from release. That would alleviate some of the disconnect that family members do have because there are ways to do it. And if we can do remote broadcasts, there are things that DOC could do remotely to help involve the family members more centrally. But we'll come back to that. But unless you have an additional comment about
Well, no, I do understand that, right? And so this is why I developed the concept paper and told like DC government, no, you're responsible for this,
that. Yes,
right? You should take more initiative into the people who are returning to the community reentry.
right,
And so you do have the biggest purse. You got more money than my family do.
exactly.
So so you can allot money to pay somebody's salary to help do these things.
Mhm.
That's what I'm saying, that my family knowledge only went so far.
Yeah.
Not that they didn't want to be involved, but they had bills and also they had lives that they were living. They
Right,
were more than happy to provide a home and help put food on the table because you're not working.
right.
I mean, so you creating all these extra bills for them.
Mhm.
The light bill going up, the gas bill going up, the water bill going up. Right. So all these things are now added on to their lives that they're happy to take on. And so
Exactly.
my thing was that the government should be more responsible and help them develop the people who they have in their custody. It's just that simple.
Now, what cohort are you all experiencing now? I know you said you were part of the first cohort, but what cohort are they at now?
We're in cohort 4.
4.
Yes.
And what's the average number of participants in the cohort?
We try to have like anywhere between like 16 to 20, but sometimes that's a huge cohort. I know when we started, it was 15 of us that graduated.
You
And
said 15?
yes, in the first cohort, it was 15 of us that
Mhm.
graduated. And about, I think it was 18 to 20 of us who were actually in the class.
Okay, okay.
you know, and it's like that's kind of taxing on the professors because they try to like not only like they really do a great job of like teaching,
Mhm.
and then they try to give each individual some time to make sure that they're on course to complete their coursework and be successful.
Mhm.
So if you got 25 people in there, that's kind of hard to do.
Yeah, that's a lot to try to give some one-to-one attention, you know. I do think that anywhere from maybe 10 to 12 is probably more manageable for one instructor, but it seems to be working with the number that you guys have, around 16 or so.
Yes, because they're committed.
Because they're committed, yeah.
No, they committed, you know, and like this is why it's so special to me, like to see so many people who are committed to the work and like changing lives, because there's not many opportunities where people are paying you to learn
Right.
and helping you get placed in employmentship.
And that's important. The placement piece is very important. You can get the education and still have doors closed to you. But those partnerships on the front end are critical. So that if you want to put people in these cohorts, give them education, you need to also have in place those partnerships that are saying, we're willing to bring you in.
Yes, and so like they also learning things like different skills and learning to work on different platforms.
Mhm.
So, you know, like it's just recently we was talking about like, okay, who do we have going on internships and where they going? And my thing is, what are they using? They
Mhm.
using Airtable, or they using Excel, or they use to make sure that that person or the people who go into these internships already know how to use the platforms that they're working on.
Mhm. Mhm.
See, because this gives them an advantage that your internship don't have to like school you on these platforms that you're working on. Like you already know them and you know
No.
how to work them efficiently.
So they give them a competitive edge by
Yeah.
teaching them those tools, especially remote tools. Because see, you don't want to just think about being on site, because remote is very much in demand now. They need to also know remote tools. It's going to give them a competitive edge, and or at least have them paired up with someone that's going to walk them through so they can get those solid skill sets.
You
Yeah,
know, Elaine, that's a good point, right? Because we are actually in person 3 days and a virtual 2 days.
Yeah, that's, people were at the beginning of what they call the Great Reset, COVID, there was resistance to even considering, once we came out of this, not returning to the office. However, there's been tremendous pushback, and companies are having to really look at becoming more flexible in their offering. So they got this hybrid model now. So like you said, a few days on site, a few days remote. And that lends itself very well because of people's lifestyles and families. It accommodates how people are living today. But yeah, I mean, that's great. So you got 3 days on and 2 days off. Okay. Tell me about 1 or 2 success stories that you are aware of.
Well, I just told you, well, I'll start with mine since I was the first cohort.
Okay.
I graduated from, even before I graduated from the pivot program, I had already, the Justice Policy Institute we had already entered into a contract agreement. And I signed my offer letter before my internship was up.
Great.
I signed, so the Justice Policy Institute not only took me on as an intern, but they hired me as a full-time employee.
Okay.
And because of the grant that they were getting because of my concept paper, so it essentially looked at it like, well, I created my own salary.
Exactly.
And so because of that, I also became the project manager for my concept paper, essentially. You know, and I don't need to tell you like skills I didn't really have because I had spent 24 years, 8 months, and 15 days of incarceration.
Okay.
And so right after that, I come out and went straight to the pivot program 6 days later. You see, my transition is different.
Right. It is. It's very different. It's not common for most.
Yeah. And so it was a struggle.
Mhm.
Right? So like having family and having people around you like to believe in you and to fuel your belief in yourself was very essential. Because like you, everybody like, oh, you talented, you got skills, but you don't really see your skills. You don't really know it until somebody else validates you.
Mhm.
So that was very important for me. And like, that's what my concept paper was designed out of, feeling this like overwhelming feeling of like being favored, so to speak.
Mhm.
And I even talk about that, like, and I'm still being favored.
Mhm.
I even talk about it in that sense that I'm still being sheltered even from the world,
Mhm.
because I walked, I walked out of prison into my family's arms. I already knew I was going to the Georgetown pivot program.
Mhm.
Then they wrapped their arms around me and gave me the tools and everything else that I would need to be successful, because I didn't know how to log onto a Wi-Fi. I didn't know anything about that. So I learned these skills. I picked them up fast.
Mhm.
Then I took all the knowledge that I've acquired and the things that I was learning there, and I put it to use instantly. And so I go into my internship and I'm still being coveted.
Mhm.
I never made it back to my old community. You see, my transition went from walked out of the jail, came home, went to one of Georgetown downtown, went to the downtown campus
Mhm.
on
Right.
Massachusetts Avenue,
Exactly.
then went to my internship on 14th Street on 14th and K,
Mhm.
went back to Georgetown and came back home.
And you bring up a good point. I gotta stop you here for a minute,
Go ahead.
because when research is being done about some of the reasons for recidivism, one of the top reasons is individuals returning to their old environment. And you just made a very clear point about why you have been successful. One, I know you attribute it to a higher being, because only God could have covered you like that. Most people don't experience that kind of covering when they're coming out. They go into the arms either of a halfway house or work release program, or straight off papers and go home, which means they're going back typically into an environment that is not conducive for them. And this is why reentry planning prior to coming out is so critical. Because if we can help people bypass old neighborhoods, old friendships, and get them the kind of covering that you had, they would be much more successful, and the recidivism rate would decrease tremendously.
It will tremendously decrease.
Mhm.
Because so I mean, like, that's just been, so I left the jail, came home, went to Georgetown, went to an internship,
Mhm. Mhm.
worked around policy work. So I worked with DC government counsel. I worked with the senates out in Maryland. I worked with the delegates out in Maryland because that was my job. Then I left that job and I came back to Georgetown to be the director of reentry services. That's my title. I'm the director of reentry services.
See,
So being the director of reentry services, I help people with their release plans.
right.
I help prepare their release plans. I tell them all the things that they're gonna need to be successful, and then walk them through what it looks like. Because sometimes we acquire so much stuff while we're incarcerated, we don't know what to do with it.
Mm.
So I'm giving the stuff that I did to be successful and say, here's the model that I created for all of us because I am successful with it. And Georgetown brought me back to be the director of reentry services. And also I'm an undergrad student at Georgetown. You see the covering?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm still covered. So people like, I don't get a chance to see you. I said, my day is surrounded with working for people and going to school. That's my day. Working for people and going to school. So we also Georgetown is running not a scholars program in Maryland, but a bachelor's of liberal arts program in Maryland. Georgetown is offering a 4-year degree to people who are currently incarcerated in Patuxent Prison.
Okay.
You like, hold on, like this took on a whole new spin. Yes.
Yeah, because my mind went to, okay, so they're doing this remotely, or faculty going inside?
No, we're going inside. We're going inside Monday through Thursday.
And do you have the capacity to offer it remotely? What if there were other individuals who are incarcerated in other states that wanted to partake in the program in Maryland?
So what we did was the statewide admissions. So we did a statewide admissions throughout the state of Maryland in the prisons. So
Okay.
we put out the application, people fill out applications, approximately 384 people
Okay.
applied for the program. So I'm one of the ones who read 384 applications.
Okay.
So we narrowed it down to the top 50.
Okay.
And we interviewed them.
Mm.
We accepted 25 in the first cohort.
Mm.
And so Patuxent is not really set up to be a remote or distant learning type of institution.
Mm-hmm.
So we physically make copies
Okay.
of all the materials and deliver. We order books, so we go back and forth like that. But Patuxent is very committed to this.
Okay.
So, I was just there Thursday. I was there Tuesday. I was there Thursday, talking with people. And a lot of people, when I got like, we've been waiting on you. They had my bio, and I was laughing. And I was like, you know what? I'm just here to serve you.
Yeah.
I said, my job here is like to help you think about what you're not thinking about. Because some of them have been, incarcerated for quite a long time.
Right.
And so they're not thinking about the things that I know that we need to be thinking about to be successful. And I'm like, it doesn't matter what your time looked like, because I was one of those people who had a lot of time. And look where I'm at today. I'm like, but you have to prepare yourself for that moment when it happens. So you won't be shocked about what, like, oh, I need to get this. So I'm helping them with, I'm just helping them with their plans.
Right.
Social Security card.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm getting their birth certificates, helping them get the Social Security card. Then as they get closer to parole, making sure they got letters. See if we can help find some employer to say that, okay, I'll give them the interview. Like, these are the things you need to be successful.
Right.
Along with living, like you got a place of residence, and you have all these letters of support.
Right.
That's what we're doing.
When you were reviewing the 50 applications, what were you looking for?
Well, I was looking for something different from my colleagues, because I served a long prison term. Mm-hmm. So I knew the things that I was doing. Like, I had earned my GED. I had went to Allegheny College in Cumberland, Maryland. I was tutoring. So I was looking for people who had already done a significant amount of time. And I was looking at what they were doing over those periods.
Mm-hmm.
And my colleagues like, what are you looking for? I said, I'm just looking to see like if you've been incarcerated for 20 years and you just got your GED. So I was like, so what was going on there? If we interviewed you, I just wanted to talk to you and like just find out, like, you spend a lot of time on lockdown, Was the institutions, like they didn't have any programs, because we always see those things.
Right.
But then you see people like over the years, they've been doing things. So those are the ones I was looking at. I was like, okay, this person has been doing some things year in and year out. So they wasn't just really concerned with just existing. They wanted to act on their existence. Like, or one of the values of Georgetown, we say, I see contemplation in action.
Right.
I just like to see that. And that's what I was looking for.
How many people on the review team have an incarceration history?
Just me.
You know why I asked that question? Just think if there was no one on that review team with an incarceration history or familiar with the inner workings of the system and etc. And you said a colleague asked you, well, what are you looking for? That told me, okay, then I want to know, what were they looking for? I mean, obviously there are some things that you would look for that were natural, I would think. How are you spending your time? Are you going through self-development, any type of growth activities? But for your colleague to ask you what you're looking for, that for me signified they really didn't know how to screen for students who would be successful in the program. So it is very important that you were there, and that review team needs to make sure in the future they always keep somebody, and not just one person, a couple of people with that history, so that there is a balance of perspective in selection criteria.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, because they was using different metrics. Like they was looking at like the essays. So they was looking at them like, what I really love what they do is that they're not just looking like the way I look at things. They looking at it, and they not looking at it like, oh, this person's incarcerated, so they're gonna lower their standards. That's what I love about it. Because they like, no, I'm not lowering my standards. I'm looking at your application as if you one of my students on campus. So they're looking at your writing, right? And they also understand that, okay, this person may have never had any formal training in writing, but they look and they see glimpse of success in those writings. And I said, wow, even I had to take notes from them. I was like, oh, I like that. So I just incorporate that with what I know. And I said, okay. And they always say, you always take a lot of notes, like when you do applications. I'm like, yeah, because I'm also looking at their writing, because we know those things improve over time.
Right. And I mean, you're making the point I was attempting to make, which is at the end, I was saying it needs to be a balanced approach. I think you offer a unique perspective, not that they didn't have a solid criteria in place, but it's a more balanced approach when you have someone that's going to look, that knows some of the more finer detailed things to look for, having had incarceration history. But of course, you need both observational perspectives. And it sounds like it's a solid process.
Yes, it is. I totally agree with you. But the problem I really have is that not many people are really into this work who are formerly incarcerated. Most of them thinking about, oh, I'm behind. I think about that too, right? But most of them think about becoming so successful without actually putting in any work. Some people have put in some work over the years, and they just have some success, which is great. But I do acknowledge that they put in their work over the years to have the success that they're having now. Some of us haven't put in any work. And so we want that instant success. And so we look at what others are doing, but not really realizing that, hey, it's a process that you must go through so you can be successful too. Absolutely. And I always tell them, like, what are you willing to sacrifice so you can be successful? That's what I always ask them. So they ask me, like, how long you been up? I said, well, I kind of sacrifice sleep to be successful, to carry my life into the next level. I'm a full-time employee. I'm a part-time student. So when do I have time to study? When do I have time to do the things I need to do to become successful? Right. So the things I talk about, like I don't see people I grew up with working where I work at.
Right.
I don't see people who I was incarcerated with working where I work at.
Mhm.
I don't see many of them. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of dedication out of your life when you are sincerely trying to help people. Go ahead.
Go
I'll tell you, we had another student who graduated. It's so many of them who've graduated from the Pivot program. And we just had a dinner the other day, and she's working at Dick's Sporting Goods in upper management office, right?
Okay.
Dealing with diversity and inclusion. That's her field. And we got another one who's working at Deloitte's. Right? It's so many of them who had did some great. And another one of my former Pivot fellows was just hired into doing like the program management portion of the Pivot program. She just graduated from there last year.
Okay.
And so I'm saying that to say that like they bringing people in, and like what I really love about it is that they asking us like, you know, what this should be like, what this should do, like, and they like teaching us the skills so we can be the leaders of these programs.
Mhm.
And that's something that I've been talking about to other agencies who always talk about directly impacted people should be leading groups and leading these organizations. And my only question to them is that how do you expect directly impacted people to do that without the skills and the tools to do it?
Right. Okay, so we're coming up on our 10:45 mark, and I want to check in with our social media platform monitors to see if we have any questions coming in.
Good morning, this is Ruth, and thank you, Mr. Walker, for joining us today. I had a question actually on there. I had noticed, I was looking at your Twitter page, and I had noticed that, you know, this life started for you early, like 13 years old. And the trajectory and everything that you've seen from, you know, your time inside and now getting a new lease on life and you know, really a fresh start. I'm wondering if you could share your hope for the future of your peers, and as you're looking at how the country has changed over the years, and now that you're, you know, out and you see everything that's going on, I'd like to know where you feel hopeful, and if you can share your thoughts about that being outside now.
Oh, so what you making reference to, you must have seen the article I wrote that was in the Daily Beast about my first encounter.
Yeah, that was wild. I just kind of popped over there and I thought, wow. I mean, and there's a lot of people who, you know, it started young, and I just wonder, you know, from all this time, when you look back on your life and you look forward, where are you finding some hope in the future?
I actually shared that story because of that. I'm like, I knew I wasn't the only 13-year-old who experienced that. And I'm like, 13-year-olds are probably experiencing it today. So I shared that story because of that. Like I wanted to see, and I wanted people to know that, yeah, you do go through things. Right. And like, it's all right to go through things. To me, it's not all right to be stuck there on those things. And so if, you know, of course, I don't have to tell you that 10, 11 years ago, you didn't see directly impacted people being a part of the table. Right? And I remember one of my friends was like, hey, we's always talking about being in the loop. And he said, man, feel good to be in the loop. And I told him, I said, no, we're not in the loop. We're a part of the loop. And I said, when I mean that we are part of the loop, meaning that we are now around the table of the loop, around the table. Like most organizations, like if they doing work of criminal justice reform, and they don't have people that's directly impacted on the staff,
Right.
I tell them, I'm like, you got an incomplete table because you don't have a vision from the other side.
Mhm.
If you've never been over there, you don't know what it felt like. You don't know what it looked like. You don't know the intricacies of it. And so I've been talking about that, and I see more and more of formerly incarcerated people on teams, on boards. I'm on a couple of different boards. One of them I just signed up for. I'm on the board of a bunch of attorneys. And they're like, you're gonna be on a bunch of attorneys. I said, that doesn't scare me. I mean, as what you said earlier, Lane, I said, when I come, I'm different because I got a different perspective. I told a friend of mine, I'm like, that's the only thing that's different about all of us that's on the stage. We all got our own perspectives. And we bring our message from that perspective. I said, that's what makes us unique on stage. We're all on the same stage, we just got a different perspective. So, I would love to see us to continue with more reform work, like on the deep end. I'm not into the low hanging fruit because because they're gonna fall off anyway. Like, I'm more into the deep end of the system. So that's why I'm so thrilled about this bachelor's program that we're doing in Patuxent. For a lot of people who got a lot of time, we're in on the deep end of the system, help change that mind frame. I think true reform can only work when we're working on both ends.
That's true.
You can't work on one end like, oh, we're doing reform. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. So I like to see more directly impacted people who have the skills to be in leadership positions.
Right.
I'm not saying that, okay, because I'm formerly incarcerated, put me in leadership position. No, I'm not saying that, because you need to have the skills to be able to operate in the position.
Right.
I'm saying if they have the skills and they meet the qualifications, give them a shot and put them in position. I mean, and we're starting to see more and more of it today. And I'm just really thrilled about it. But definitely I want to see more second look laws for everyone.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Look, if you've seen, I was one of the lead advocates of the second look law in the district. I mean, and that happened, that was a complete joy for me, because it gave me a different energy, because I was able to help a lot of people at one time. Because I can't go back and people, so many people I've met throughout my time. Like, but I knew a lot of them who were under 25 when they committed their offenses from the district. So now they have a chance. I was getting so many calls. People who were not programming, like, have never took a class, didn't have a GED. When that law was passed, they signed up for the GED classes. They started getting in programs because now they don't have to live without hope.
Right.
See, when they have the 60, 70, or 80 years of a sentence, you're like, why should I program? I'm not going home. But now with second look, what it does is say, oh, after 15 years, the court will review my sentencing. So guess what else that do? Me having lived there before, incident reports. See, nobody's measuring this. How many incident reports that didn't happen for people who are eligible for this law when they get 15 years in from the district inside the Federal Bureau of Prison? Nobody's telling us. How many incident reports didn't happen? How many fights?
Right.
How many stabbings? How many people that lost their lives? Nobody's telling us these things. See, if we can get these numbers, we can say, hey, this here can shift the mindset of people. And now we can go forward with more progressive reform laws.
Right.
See, that's my hope right there. I really want to see that, because I've been thinking about, like, I want to know how many people have been in fights since this law is passed. How many people enrolled in programs? How many people? So they're not telling us these things. But I do hope that we can get to a point where we can share this type of data and we can go forward with making more equitable laws for people who've been, disadvantaged by the laws that's been created.
Ruth, any additional questions? Anyone else?
Not from this end. Thank you so much, Mr. Walker. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so Mr. Walker, we're going to leave you with the last few minutes to offer any additional commentary, talk about any program applications that might be coming due, grants, books, etc. Anything you want to share with the audience?
Miss Elaine.
Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We have LaTanya Tate on LinkedIn.
Go ahead, go ahead.
She's a newly elected city council in Birmingham, Alabama, and says these programs would be work great in our prisons and jails. How can she get involved in them?
Tyrone?
Wow, that is a very, very good question. And when she said Birmingham, Alabama, I was thinking about who's doing what in Birmingham. You know, like who's doing it or who wants to do it, but have yet to be funded to actually do it. Or even sometimes like you have these issues with DOC. Not that DOC don't want to bring these programs in. It's just that they haven't found the right partners for it. I would want to know who is doing that work in Birmingham, or who wants to do it. And being newly elected, I think about, not reaching up, but reaching across. So who's the organizations that's across from you that want to do this work? I think you should build with them and make it happen.
Now, Sonia, that was Miss Tate from Alabama?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for that question. Any
You're
additional
welcome. Thank
questions?
you.
Any additional questions?
No, ma'am. That
All
was
right.
it.
Well, I want to once again thank everyone for joining us today with our guest, Mr. Tyrone Walker. Tyrone, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, just thank you for having me. Thank you for all the questions, and just taking an interest in the programs that we're running here at Georgetown University Prisons and Justice Initiative.
Great. Thank you so very much for joining us. We want to thank our Justice Beat listening audience and all social media platforms for joining us today, all of the wonderful questions. And we'll be back on next Saturday for the next installment of the Justice Beat Talk Show. Thank you once again, and God bless. Are we good, Brandon?